Okay, so this has been going on for a few months now, but things just went to the next level last night. I was about 6 months pregnant when this started back in October. We had only been living in this house for about 2 or 3 months and everything had been normal. The first few times it happened, I didn't think too much about it. I just thought it was a bird or something. The whistling always happens at night. It is one higher pitched whistle, a very short pause, and then a lower pitched whistle. I'll start with the first time I noticed there was something odd. I was probably 7 months pregnant and my dog and I were napping on the couch. For whatever reason, while I was pregnant, I would moan in my sleep. Sometimes, so loud I would wake myself up. So, I was asleep and I woke myself up moaning, and then I heard the whistling. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen. I know I was just hearing things because the dog shot up and looked in the kitchen and his ears perked up. After that happened, I noticed that the whistling was only happening at night and I had never heard a bird or anything else make a sound during the day. It started to become more frequent, but the dog and I were the only ones that were hearing it. I told my husband about it, but he just kind of brushed it off. The second weird thing that happened was, at the end of my pregnancy, my husband and I were in bed. I was sleeping and he was watching TV. I was moaning like normal. My husband said it was getting louder and louder. Then he heard the whistling and I stopped moaning. He woke me up to tell me this. After I had my daughter in January, the whistling had pretty much stopped until the last couple of weeks. I have been hearing it almost every night on Sunday. My husband and I both heard it. Last night, after my husband got home from work, he took the dog outside. We have a very long and narrow patch of trees directly across the road from our house. I was in the house. The windows were open but the curtains were closed, so I could hear but not see. So, according to my husband, the dog was peeing and really focused on a patch of trees. And then he saw a cat, but the cat was stalking something in the trees. After the dog was done peeing, he took off. At first, my husband thought it was the cat, but something shot out of the trees. In the house, I heard claws on the pavement. First, really fast ones, then obvious strides of our dog. I heard my husband yell for the dog to come back. When they came in the house, it looked as if my husband had seen a ghost. He said that whatever came out of the trees was pretty big. About as big as our dog, who is a Doberman Pinscher about 110 pounds, on all fours. It ran so fast that he said that he wasn't paying attention and probably would have missed it if he wasn't looking. It looked more like a human, though, that was on all fours. It was dark in color and jumped in the air and disappeared. All last night, the dog did not want to be alone. Usually he sleeps on the couch, but my husband had to throw him out on the bed. This morning, my husband went outside to the trees to see if there was any obvious spot where this thing was been living. Went over to check it out. Our neighbor, whose yard backs up to the trees, came outside when my husband told him there was something big there last night. And the neighbor said, "Oh, it won't hurt nothing." I can't help but to think of this creature and the whistling are related. If anyone can help me figure out what it is, it would be greatly appreciated. Forget about the wild man of Borneo. Back in the early 1900s, we had our own wild man right here in Wood County, Wisconsin. In August of 1910, the local papers were full of stories of encounters with the Wood County wild man. Marshfield, Stevens Point, Oshkosh, and Grand Rapids newspapers all had stories with various details about the strange man near Auburndale. It was first reported that Marshfield was in terror over the wild man who was living in the forest surrounding Auburndale on August 15th. It said he occasionally appeared in the open wearing only a shirt, more abbreviated than a Scottish kilt. Reporters were quick to point out the man had been seen in broad daylight and the story was neither a hoax nor hallucination. Though, to inhabit a wooded spot near the old George Zollinger place where the unkept man was called wild as a hawk in his actions. The Eckwelds, who resided there, had seen him many times, but any attempt to approach him, he made off his lair with the speed of a deer. He puts one hand on a fence post and vaults 5-wire fence as easy as a college athlete, and his speed defies pursuit, according to one story. A group of men and boys had tried to surround and approach him, but he leaped a fence and went into the ground in deep thickets. Local berry pickers were given this domain a wide berth as authorities tried to capture him. Officer Smith and Thompson from Marshfield and Sheriff Griffin to Grand Rapids had been searching but had only managed to elude them, never allowing them a glimpse. A subsequent story joked that they were especially anxious to catch him so he could be the star attraction of the street fair of the following week. The wild man became such a hot topic that Griffin and Schmidt actually perpetuated a joke on a salon keeper with the aid of a Curly Babcock, who impersonated the wild man in realistic style, giving a rise to the story that had been apprehended. Another time, Officer Thompson and D.A. Andrews made fruitless trip to the area where he was often seen. Unlike Griffin and Schmidt, though, they extended sympathy toward the man, stating it was likely the new man was deranged, but since no one had reported anything missing, it was different and difficult to say that the man was or where he came from. Meanwhile, in Plover, 21-year-old William N.S., who was living in the woods of Plover, milking cows and stealing food in the nighttime, was captured, examined, and found insane and committed to the Northern Asylum. Likewise, in the woods of Colby, wildman Herman Schneider, who was living on a game and roots, eventually was captured and hospitalized. In Wood County, however, no reports were ever made of the wildman's capture. Who was he? And what was his story? Who knows, but perhaps the wood legend is true. And maybe it does have its very own Bigfoot. A throwback to this early wild man. The Lummi Indian Reservation is in the inland northwest corner of Washington, 8 miles west of Bellingham and 20 miles south of the Canadian border in western Whatcom County. After receiving several reports of Sasquatch sighting on the Lummi Nation Indian Reservation, Lummi Police Sergeant Ken Cooper was called to the residence of 78-year-old Emma Smith on the night of October 23 of 1975. She reported a Bigfoot attempt to break into her house, and she had fled in terror. Sergeant Cooper found the plastic of the storm door had been torn, and the door's wooden frame splintered. Boards had also been torn from a nearby smokehouse, but he could not find the creature nor any person. He returned to the residence around 2:30 a.m., shining the spotlight from his patrol car into the woods. He found a group of 7 people already there, with their own spotlight set directly on a huge, 7.5-foot tall, hairy creature. Cooper aimed his 12-gauge shotgun at the creature. Concerned that it would be a human in a costume, he yelled, "If there's somebody just fooling around, you better knock it off, because we have weapons." The creature just crouched down. As Sergeant Cooper stepped forward, the creature lowered himself down even further, until only his head was showing above the brush. For 20 minutes, Sergeant Cooper and the other people stared down the crouching hairy creature, until they heard noises in the brush to the right. People said that they were seeing more Bigfoots there. At that point, Cooper decided it was time for them to leave the scene. He returned to the location after dawn and found bare footprints in the forest-covered ground. He measured the footprints in. They were 18 inches long and 7 inches wide. Over the coming weeks, the Lummi Tribal Police received over 100 reports of sightings of Bigfoot creatures. Sergeant Cooper himself saw Bigfoots 2 more times shortly after the first encounter. A veteran hunter from Maple Falls, Washington, named Such, was scout hunting areas while south of the Canadian border on the U.S. side, due west of NF 3140, but somewhere east of the South Pass Road. Stopping to rest, he was sitting up against a tree off of a well-worn game trail, waiting and resting. He was sitting in complete camouflage gear, listening to something walking up from behind. He said he sat frozen because it was too lag sounding. He could hear it breathe. His heart was pounding in his chest for more time than he said he cared to admit, because he was there, and there was no trail behind him. Such Never did see whatever made the crashing footsteps in the brush behind him. Finally, another hunter walked up on the game trail in front of him, and as the man walked past him with his pack and rifle, Such hollered out, "Hello?" scaring the other hunter nearly to death. Such realized he scared the fellow hunter because he jumped sideways and asked him if he wanted to sit down with him, welcoming the company of another hunter, who said he was from Nooksack, Washington area. The Nooksack man sat down, and of course the conversation told Such that he had encountered something that he had never seen before in those woods, which is why he was so nervous. He had tracked this something up near where Such had been sitting around, and Such figured that was why he was heard passing behind him earlier moments before. The Nooksack man never did say what he thought he saw, only that it was covered with hair like a bear and maybe 8 to 9 feet tall, huge and walking on 2 legs like a man walks. He said it was no bear, of that I'm sure. From the description, Such thought it was a Sasquatch, and he told the Nooksack man what he thought the man had saw, and then he went quiet. He got up and left, and went back down the game trail. He never get this man to see or ever meet him again. When I was little, I was often terrorized by these 3 things. The supposed entity is really the only proper term. I'll start by saying that these 3 entities were not at all similar in appearance to anything I feared in childhood. On the contrary, one of them was quite like an animal. I always thought it had an undeserving and bad reputation. The experiences were not like dreams, but they weren't sleep paralysis either. I was free to move around as I pleased and had no reason to believe that carbon monoxide was the culprit. The first entity was like an alligator, however. It had a frightfully expressive face. Not human-level expression, but like a dog you consider part of the family. But instead of loyalty and love, the creature's face was full of menace and arrogance. It would crawl around the floor and snap at me. But I was under the impression that it could not, for the time being, actually harm me if I stayed off the ground. The second was less lively, but much, much scarier. Fortunately, it resided in my grandma's home. It was kind of an angular shadow with bright lights for eyes. It moved around room to room, but only when no one was present but me. Looking at it filled me with dread and terror, but when I closed my eyes, I felt that it could do nothing to me. I spent a lot of time walking around the house with my eyes shut. The third was the least outwardly scary, but the strangest. It usually accompanied the alligator, but would occasionally be found alone in my bathroom. It was large, purple blob without any features. There was no doubt that it was alive, but it was not lively in the least. It was almost the embodiment of looming anxiety, and, unlike the former, would shrink into nothingness if I looked at it long enough. But when the alligator was around, looking at the purple thing was hard to do. One night, I awoke to see the alligator feverishly crawling around, snapping and snarling at me. It seemed almost pained. Strangely enough, I felt no fear this time. I looked over to the big, comfy chair next to my bed and saw it was being accompanied by a smallish, grandfatherly man. He was staring at the alligator. Without looking up, he told me, "Go back to sleep. I won't leave until they can't come back." So I did just that. When I woke up, the man and alligator were gone. None of them ever came back. Although I had felt a presence like the old man's a few times in life. We were in the Dominican Republic, staying at a locally owned hotel. It was a nice hotel, but nothing luxe, and very open soft air space. We had all gone out for dinner and enjoyed a bottle of wine, but weren't drunk or anything. I'm reading in bed and my husband comes out from the bathroom completely white-faced in shock. There's a spider in the bathroom. I look at him and laugh. Spiders in the Dominican Republic are big, but nothing to freak over. He looked like as of Satan himself, by his expression. So I go to the bathroom. All I see are 4 thick, hairy orange and black legs coming from a sink basin. They were at least 10 inches long and at least as thick as pencils. Very hairy. From about 5 feet away, I could see separate orange-black hairs. I'm short, so I couldn't see the whole thing over the sink from the distance I was. There was a towel blocking the direct view plus the sink basin. But just by the legs, I saw that it was almost a 2-foot-long spider. I calmly walked back to my husband. Did you see it? I nod and leave the room to get help from the front desk. Our broken Spanish had the staffers an hysterical laugher, not to mention that they had just took as overactive tourists of scared of a little spider. One staffer, Jose, came to look and it was gone. Jose tells us that he has at least 3 in his home, which is when I realize that these people don't either believe me or understand what I'm saying. I've lived in tropical climates before, and there's no way in hell you'd share a home with a spider we saw. A day later, and we have a normal spider infestation. I go to the desk and ask for bug spray. The staffers are still having a laugh at our expense, but the same guy Jose comes up with me with the spray. We're cleaning the spiders, and we are about 5 inches or so of daddy long leg types. He is surprised when I'm suddenly not scared by these spiders. He asks why I informed him that these spiders aren't what we saw last night. I use my hands to show him the size of the one we saw. His mouth dropped. I've never heard or seen anything like that in my entire life in the Dominican Republic. But who knows what comes out of the jungle. It wasn't until a little while later that my husband, while discussing with Harry, our pet name for the spider, realized that we had only seen half of it. My estimate of a 10-inch leg would probably actually be about 20. 2 feet was severely off. He saw the whole body, and the body minus the legs. It was as wide as his entire hand, a grown man's hand, so it was likely way bigger than 2 feet in diameter. He also said there were multiple black eyes. While fishing on the Stiligilmish River near Robe, Washington on September 5th of 1980, I came across a set of 3 large human-like tracks in the river sand. 2 of these tracks were spaced side by side facing the river edge, while the third track was 5 feet away behind the others, behind a boulder. A hillside sloping away from the river revealed slide marks which appeared to be made by the culprit as it made its way to the river and apparently walked into the water. A search in subsequent days of both sides of the river found no more tracks in the area. Renee Dahidan arrived at the scene 1 week later, and the tracks could still be seen, indicating a very little human trafficking area. Newspaper articles about this find turned up more that 10 additional people from the area who claimed to have had or found similar tracks nearby in recent years, and one claimed to have seen the Sasquatch who made them. This area of Washington state has a history of Sasquatch sightings of footprint finds, and some good audio tapes have been recorded in Snohomish County of supposed Sasquatch vocalizations. Although these footprints do not prove the existence of a Sasquatch, the large amount of reported activity in the area by credible witnesses indicates that something strange is going on there. Dr. Jeff Meldrum at Idaho State University has the only surviving cast from this occurrence and concluded that it follows the pattern of other authentic casts in his collection. So this happened a couple of years ago. I was walking home from my work and my road is a busy road, so it's busy with people and cars, and it was rush hour. Walking towards me from a distance was somebody wearing a black hoodie with the hood up. I noticed that something seemed to be wrong with their face. I didn't want to look at them too much and avoid being rude, but I couldn't help but noticing that they were walking in a hurried way and as if they did not want to be seen, keeping their head down. As I got closer to them, I couldn't resist getting a closer look, so I looked over to their face and it was almost completely blank. Like when you're editing a photo and you turn the brightness or contrast all the way up so all the facial features are gone apart from the eyes, mouth, and nose. This is what this person's face was, but instead of pure white, more the yellow white of the moon or magnolia paint. That's not all. When I looked at their face, Religious images flooded in my mind of horror, evil, and hell. That was a total fist for me. I'm not a religious person at all. My mind got very bad vibes from what I had just seen, and something told me that I should forget about what I'd seen and not think about it again. Very unusual for me. I'm not usually a curious person, but I felt compelled to forget about this ASAP. So, I actually made an effort to not think about it, and didn't tell anyone about it until several weeks later when the emotions I felt were more faded. I don't think they just had a deformity or skin condition, because there was nothing there rather than something. And the emotions and images I got from looking at their face were unlike anything I've ever experienced. I wish I hadn't tried to forget it so instantly, as I might remember other things about it that could point to a more logical explanation or something else, whatever it may be. Several years ago, I lived in a basement suite with my two kids. There was a lot of paranormal activity in the 2 years that we lived there. We ended up moving out due to guys upstairs partying and doing crack, so that could have contributed to stuff going on downstairs. The first week that I moved in, my kids were at their dad's house. I was alone in the living room, in total silence, reading something on my laptop. I had an upholstered chair sitting a few feet from me. I heard something that sounded like a very heavy object, like a book, hitting the seat of the chair. Although, really, the seat was soft enough that anything heavy hitting it would not have made much sound at all. But that was where the sound was coming from. I glanced up, and when I did, I saw this thing on the chair. It kind of looked like a little ferret, sandy or caramel colored. When it saw me look over, it tried to duck behind the arm of the chair. Then it just disappeared. It was there 1 second and gone the next. It surprised me, but didn't frighten me. It was just weird. I can't even say that it looked like a ferret. That is just the only thing that I could compare it to. About a year later, my youngest son and I were in a bedroom, on my bed, playing this game we called the baby game. Basically, just one of us pretended to be a baby while the other person was the parent. Sometimes the baby was a bad baby, sometimes good. I think that my youngest son was just wanting some nurturing after a bad breakup between his parents. My son was being the baby and I was lying beside him, stroking him and talking to him. It was early evening and my bedside lamp was on. My bed was a box spring and a mattress without legs, so it was kind of close to the ground. I was looking over at my son, and right beside the bedside table was this thing again. It was only there for a second and then disappeared, fast enough that it didn't trust my eyes. It was 2 or 3 feet high, taller size, and was standing right against the bed like an inch away from my son. It was covered in long, slightly curly caramel color hair, but it had no face, arms, or shoulders that I could see. It looked like a cousin. It from the Addams family. It didn't have the shape of a dog. It was straight up and down. As I said, it was split second, so I didn't see any movement. I didn't feel any energy from it, negative or otherwise. It was neutral. I was really surprised to see it. I didn't see anything to my son because I honestly believed that it was some weird sight issue. A few minutes later, it was my turn to be the baby. A son was looking over at me, and I was close to the edge of the bed. He blinked for a second, then said, "Mom, I just saw this weird thing. I think it was a wig creature or a ghost dog." He described the exact same thing, color and shape, and he said he only saw for a second. He had been claiming throughout the time we lived there that he saw giant bulldog faces in the middle of their room. I thought that he was making it up because he had a bulldog stuffy that he really liked. We also saw a lot of ghosts there in that place. Pretty much if you turn on the lights, you could see a whole bunch of people standing in the dark. In the front was an old lady, and the back was a little Asian girl. I had a very elaborate way of turning on my lights at night that involved me never looking in the dark, and in bed, I never opened my eyes. Some of my internet friends make jokes at my expense because I live in Arkansas. Do you even have electricity, and do you find your cousin attractive? What we do have is a fuckload of trees and mountains. You leave the greater Little Rock area and drive through 30 minutes, sit and hit a town. Another 30 minutes you hit another town. Another 30 and you see where this is going. You know the saying that the universe is 99% empty space? That's basically this fucking state, but it's 99% woods. I lived on the edge of one such huge expanse of woods. I spent a lot of time in the woods with my friends. We'd find normal dead animal carcasses, weird fire circles set up by local rednecks or meth heads, and other basic inner woods stuff. So, one night, I was going through some normal teenage angst shit and I was sitting on the roof, looking at the stars. It's mostly full moon and I can see through the trees and it's really chill up there. It was a nice autumn breeze. My mom and little sister were sitting outside on the hot tub right under the edge of the roof in front of me. I hear them get up to go in and I'm still relaxing. You know the feeling where you know something is watching you? It's different from the regular spooky vibe you'll get. It's something in your brain that doesn't care about the reason or reality TV. He's the hit or woman over the head and get it. All of a sudden my relaxation is gone. I immediately know something is not okay. I know something is staring at me and it would like nothing better than to eat my scrawny ass. Just for reference, there's an edge of the roof, just about 6 feet of deck, and then 20 feet of yard until our 6-foot privacy fence. We set up the privacy fence in front of this shitty chain link fence that was there before we moved in because, you know, meth heads. And then behind the fence is a ton of shitty bushes and shrubs, and then right behind that is trees. I start to scan the fence and I notice something directly in front of where I was going. Keep in mind, my mom and little sister would have been between me and it. So I noticed this outline. All I know is I see black of the shrubs and trees, and then right above the privacy fence is what looks like brown-colored outline of a head and shoulders. My first thought was, the fuck, is someone standing on the chain link fence looking over? The thing rattles like a motherfucker when I climb on it, so it can't be that. Apparently my feet had gone under and started moving my ass towards the edge of the roof without consulting my brain. I get to the edge of the roof and looking at this outline when I hear a scream from a horror movie monster. Imagine if you shoved a bear, a cougar, and one of those screech owls into a mosh pit and recorded the noises, then added some heavy distortion to it. I remember instantly turning and running to the opposite side of the roof, parkoured off that bitch, and ran inside, crying to my mom. The informants. A man and his wife were not too far from me camping in the summer of 2000, and during their stay they were experiencing some rather frightful events. The reason they contacted me was because they had come across a sighting, and because theirs happened so close to where mine was, they wanted to talk to me. They were camping for 2 weeks, and during this time their food was being taken, and even some clothes were missing. They thought maybe coyotes or even bears, but one morning, after hearing something in the campsite during the night, they woke up to find everything else tossed around the campsite. Even the guy's boat on the trailer was moved a few feet. One night in particular, something hit the side of the window and broke it, and in the morning they found a large rock sitting there in the dirt. On another night, they said it sounded like a few people were on the outside their trailer, mumbling. Jill said it was like someone had their mouth full of food. I pictured a picture of a Sasquatch eating all their food and trying to talk to each other. After that morning, they cleaned up and had breakfast when Jill had noticed bare footprints just off the side of their camper. And they said it was obvious to them by the size of the prints that their visitor during the night had to be a Sasquatch, nothing else. It said that the prints were around 18 inches long. The man put his size 12 foot inside the print, and there were still 5 or so inches more than in his in length. They told me that a couple days later, they were out in the boat fishing and actually saw this thing in their campsite while they were out on the boat. Apparently, it was throwing their stuff around and making a mess of things. The couple described a Sasquatch as a reddish brown, with long arms and a funny-shaped head. They believed it to be a male because of its bulk, size, and height, which they said was about 7 to 8 feet tall. I asked if it could have been a bear, and they both replied, "As God is our witness, what we saw was a Sasquatch." After describing the arms, legs, and head and all, there was nothing else it could have been. Personally, judging by their body language and the way they were trembling while talking to me, I believe them 100%, no doubt whatsoever. The older couple said they waited in their boat for a while until they were certain it was gone. As fast as they could, they chucked everything into their camper and left the area, only packing up properly when they got to town where they ended up staying in the night. My name is X. I'm an 8-year veteran of the US Army with a clearance to loose, so please keep my name out. Sometime in 2001, my now ex-wife and I were driving towards Scranton, Pennsylvania on Highway 81. It was late at night. My wife and I were talking to help break the monotony. I had just noticed a very dark object leaning over the edge of the road as we drove past. We passed extremely close to the object, close enough for me to feel the shock to see a very large, hairy section of wall, muscled leg, and big, hairy wrist, and a hand as the creature turned and strode to walk the embankment as we passed. The area we were driving through was through a mountainous area of the Pennsylvania section. The incline he had to have gone down several hundred feet at a sharp angle. My wife screamed and grabbed me. I slammed on the brakes and reached for my 20-gauge mag shotgun. My wife screamed again and hysterically told me no way in hell was I getting out of the car. I tried my best to tell her, hey, I'm combat trained, I have a weapon, I just have to see what the hell it was. But she would have none of it and kept freaking out. In disgust, I drove off mad at the world for letting me get a tiny glimpse of one of the world's greatest mysteries. What a tease the whole thing was. I wanted to see the entire thing for myself. But what can I say? It looked like a linebacker with a serious hair issue. I would estimate it would have been at least 7-8 feet tall. What really surprised me was the attitude of the thing. No fear of our vehicle at all. My wife and I had both seen bear before, and agreed it was not a bear. What bear can walk down an incline on his hind legs? I spent the rest of the trip starting out the window, wishing I had seen more of whatever it was.